something in the water.
There's just something in the water.
Oh God! Oh God! Just kidding, I'm okay. What's up, geeks and geekettes? It's a very special edition of the Countdown City Geekcast. This is going to be our Alien Romulus review. My name is Ted, aka Steady. Joining me on this review is David Fede Alvarez, super fan. What's going on, sir?
What's up, guys? As you can see behind me, my Stormtrooper helmet is being attacked by a facehugger. Not on the face, but at the top of his dome. And I have a special Wayland Yutani patch that was given out at the fan event that we are going to actually include with the facehugger giveaway. So you will get this this really nice rubberized patch. I got one myself. It's really cool. It's a big sticker, essentially. So.
And regarding that facehugger giveaway, entries have now been closed, and we will announce the winner on this video. How do you like them apples? All right.
Nice.
But first, we're here to talk about Alien Romulus. And I know what you're thinking. I haven't seen it yet. Don't spoil it, Ted. We're not going to spoil it just yet. This first part or this first portion of this review is going to be non-spoilers, just to give you guys a bit of an insight on how we felt walking out of the theater, just our general overview, our general thoughts about the film. But just in case you don't know that much about the movie, it stars Kaylee Spenny, David Johnson, Archie Renault, Isabella Merced, Spike Fern, and Aileen Wu. And this, of course, is directed by Fede Alvarez and also produced by the man himself, Ridley Scott. It was very important to make sure Ridley gave his blessing, and his blessing he did give. So, David, you've seen Alien Romulus. Give us your general overview, your thoughts after watching the movie.
I loved it. I thought it was a great entry. It's the 7th entry in the series of Alien films, going back to Alien versus Predator, Alien from 1979, then Aliens from 1986. This movie takes place in between those two storylines, so it really benefited you if you go out and watch the first two movies. You kind of have a good headspace and a great place to be before you watch this. Also, a big fan of Prometheus. That movie is one of my like core memory movies, a movie that I think about all the time. It's directly tied to the alien mythology. A lot of people didn't like it. Some people loved it. I mean, I think I'm in the camp where I loved it. Covenant came afterwards. Is basically a sequel to Prometheus, starred Michael Fassbender as the artificial person. I thought that was a good film too, as a continuation. But walking out of the film, I was hoping for another Fede Alvarez film that I could rewatch, and I think this is one of them. I've seen it twice already. Luckily, my wife wanted to see it. She's a big horror fan. This is horror, thriller, sci-fi, and it didn't disappoint. If you watch it with a lot of people in the theater, you'll hear audible gasp, you'll hear a cheer or two maybe, and I mean, the use of light, the use of very creative solutions to take on the aliens and the face huggers. I really like that. So there's a lot of new concepts in the film as far as like battling the alien. Um, so yeah, I mean, coming out of it, I knew Fede Alvarez. I got to see the Alien Romulus panel live at San Diego Comic Con. I listened to a lot of his answers to a lot of the questions that people had, and a lot of his general overview and his thought process of how he saw film and how he approached this film, and I think just his general approach to everything is very similar to what I kind of think of in the responses that I would give. So I'm a huge fan of Don't Breathe, and his Evil Dead film was fantastic. So I just came away liking him even more. And then when he walked off stage, he gave me a fist bump, and he was one of the guys that told me thank you personally. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is SDCC was insane with all the people that we met. But Fetty was one of the guys that, if I were to interview him, I would tell him, hey, look, man, you are one of the directors that's highly sought after. All your films are critically acclaimed and universally either liked or loved. I mean, the stuff he did with Alien Romulus was terrific. Originally, it was going to go straight to Hulu, a lot like Prey did,
Wow.
but they thought the better because they saw what kind of acclaim and praise that Prey got. So it's like, we're not going to make that mistake again. Let's put it in theaters. It was an $80 million budget, and it ended up making 108 million worldwide. So they already made back the money that they used. The use of practical effects was amazing. The use, the marriage between the CGI and practical effects was a very good mix, and also casting was great. I mean, you listed the names, a lot of names that people don't know. Kaylee Spaney, I think, is the most famous person. She's done a few things, but in general, bringing in that whole Alien from 1979 aesthetic into 2024 in the Alien Romulus, they were able to bridge that gap, and I was very interested to see how they were going to
How?
bridge that gap and
Yeah.
see if it was going to be too like surpassing what they thought the future was going to look like in 1979, but it was like a perfect blend, I thought. And the sound design terrific. You're going to recognize all the sounds from the original Alien, and references to other films were in there. It was great, well acted. Sound design was great, of course. Directing was great. The solutions to all their problems, fantastic. Um, the movie flowed. It felt like it was a long but short 2 hours. It's very kind of like a contradictory thing. It's very paradoxical, but I think it was one of those things where you thought the movie maybe could end here. It didn't, and it continued with another act. And kind of a lot like the original Alien movie, where you thought the movie could have ended before Sigourney Weaver had to deal with the alien in her ship. It was that kind of situation, but it was fantastic. I loved it. Saw it twice.
I'm going to mimic a lot of that sentiment. This movie was pulled directly from the 80s. Like, if you were to tell us this movie came out right after Alien, I would believe you, because the look of it, the style of it, the details of the sets, it is just so spot on with everything that was done back in the original two films. Mostly because director Fede Alvarez went and got the same crew from those movies. It was like, work on the creatures with us, work on the sets with us, work on all the practical stuff with us. And they were game. And so when you go that route and you seek out those original folks who built things with their hands and painted things and put all the details into the ships and the hallways and everything. I mean, that says a lot. Fede is an absolute fan, and it really shows in his passion, the way he spoke about the film at San Diego Comic Con, video coming out soon, and just everything, all the details, all the very minute things that he hid in the film that we actually still haven't seen. I think we talked about that a little bit earlier, and we'll kind of mention that in the spoiler portion of this. The horror elements were great. I like that we were able to see things and experience things as an audience for the very first time. One of the shots is in the trailer. It's a bunch of face huggers like chasing somebody down a hallway, and it's like, we've not seen stuff exactly like that. We've seen like a room filled with eggs and face huggers coming out, but chasing folks like, swimming in water and jumping out at people's faces. There was just very kind of different elements that we got to see for the very first time, and it was all fantastic. It was entertaining. I was engaged throughout, and I will say this movie was still able to surprise me in ways I did not anticipate. Um, I'll save it for the spoiler portion of this, but even when I thought I had this movie figured out, even when I figured, cool, we're sort of, kind of reaching the end here, there's still so many surprises in store, and it's really fantastic when you're able to still pull the rug out from under people, even in a franchise where that happens so often. I didn't anticipate kind of the twists and the turns that we were able to still go through, and the surprises of familiar elements or faces or things of that nature. I don't, again, it's not spoiler yet, but we're getting really close. So all in all, I had a blast. It was great. It felt like it was made by the same individuals from Alien. It was a worthy addition to this franchise. I applaud Alvarez, the cast, who were fantastic. Just everything was just spot on. So many unique new ideas that were given to us, both from the creature side as well from the technology side. We saw some new technological things that were really effective. And then on the other side of that coin, the flip side of that coin, you were still able to honor and celebrate what made the original movies great. And that, my friends, is the end of our non spoiler discussion. From here on out, you're getting spoiled. So this is the part of the video where you should pause it right now. And for those of you who have seen the movie, we want to hear from you guys. Let us know what your thoughts are about the film. What worked for you? What didn't work for you? Did you enjoy the film overall? Do you want to see more from this universe with Fede Alvarez? And we'll talk about that at the end of our discussion. So, David, let me just start off by saying I was also very interested on how he was going to tie this story into the greater sort of aliens universe. And I was surprised that he did not go with his cast being part of the colony that was overrun to set up Aliens, the sequel to Aliens. I could have just figured, I was like, all right, he's probably going to give us the colony folks who were on this original planet that Ripley's team landed on in the first one, but we're going to see the colony get overrun eventually, and that's where the story is going to end up. But no, he went. It would really surprise me is he went took it a step further. There was basically another encounter with facehuggers, with xenomorphs that nobody knew about. At least nobody outside of Wayland Yutani, if you pretty much. And he gave us this sort of self-contained story, and it's so surprising he went that route. It wasn't a story that could have been mixed in with Ripley's overall story between Alien and Aliens, but it's just sort of separate spin-off self-contained story, which was still entertaining. But I was really surprised that he actually went that route. Were you surprised that we sort of got this new side story that kind of came out of nowhere?
I actually didn't think that way. I thought it was going to be a group of like young adults, downtrodden, trying to like escape whatever planet they were stuck on, light years away from where they wanted to be. So I'm not sure if I saw like a featurette about that, but that's kind of what my mind was thinking, and that was
Hmm.
basically it. Um, I knew Fetty was going to do a really good job with this because, of course, you can tell that he was a fan. Even from the beginning, you get that kind of 1979 alien shot of deep space, of nothingness with like a little sprinkle of like stardust out there. And then a ship appears, and then you see wreckage, and then you see one of the pieces of the ship reveal part of the Nostromo name that blew up in the original film. And it's like, okay, well, that's there. There's a wreckage. They recover the actual alien that was shot out of the ship from Ellen Ripley, um, and that's how that alien kind of infected that space station, Romulus and Remus there, that was just floating above the planet with our actors who they were very youthful, very interesting picks. We saw them at San Diego Comic Con, and they worked. I think the cast was fantastic. David Johnson as the synthetic, as the artificial
Amazing.
person. He had he had a big time acting job there. He had to play the adoptive brother to Rain Carradine, who was played by Kaylee Spaney, and he was playing Andy, the synthetic person. And we find out very early on that he's synthetic because you see the milkish blood that he got attacked by some little kids. So I was kind of surprised that we kind of revealed that so quick, because I think early on in the marketing they didn't really show that. They did show his eyes roll back, but they never showed the Weyland Yutani logo on his eyeballs when he was rebooting, which we get to see later on.
I think
Um,
there was something said at San Diego that stuck with me, and so I think I already knew he was the artificial person because of a comment he had made, or somebody had asked him a question about being a synthetic, and so I was like, oh, okay, so that's who he's gonna be.
yeah, terrific young British actor David Johnson. He's going to go places after this for sure. Um, the CGI was terrific as far as the space stuff, the ships, and like I said, the use of practical effects. $80 million budget, very very low budget for a big film that a studio releases in the summertime. So kudos to them. Finding out that it's directly connected to the first Alien. You see the Nostromo. You see, um, they don't know it, but the alien got loose on the ship. I guess it like I don't know, like the explanation of how the alien got encased in like a cocoon. I guess it was like a defense mechanism type thing.
Okay, yeah. I had the same question. So we know
Yeah,
the xenomorph got shot into space. That's one of the final shots of that movie,
yeah.
and then he ends up getting into like almost a block of,
Hmm.
I don't know, ore or something,
I think it was a
and
cocoon type thing it generated.
but it was
That's
so hard shelled, right?
well, you figure with like the zero atmosphere of space, the I mean, the central vacuum. Maybe when it sets up like it's like hive on the ship, since there's no oxygen or severe lack of oxygen, that's kind of it solidifies that way. I don't know. That's just kind of be thinking, but um, we
That
find
was a
out that
that was a huge
yeah,
question because they cut it open like it was fossilized, like it
right,
was that deep, and it had been. I mean, this movie takes place 20 years after Alien, but that's not necessarily when they picked up the remains of the
right,
xenomorph.
right.
I
Yes.
wish they would have told us maybe how it became fossilized out in space. That would have been interesting to find out.
So yeah, once the kids get on the space station that's floating above their their mining colony planet, where you figure out that they're stuck there for a really long time mining for Weyland Yutani, which is the evil corporation that we see all throughout the Alien films.
Yep.
Um, they get up there. They're looking to get cryo chambers to sleep in because it's a 9-year travel to the next desirable planet. So that's the whole kind of plan. That's kind of the scheme that they come up with to fly away and cryo sleep. They get up there, and of course, it's the Weyland Yutani ship. It had the original alien on board. They killed it, and it leaked its blood through several floors. But they were experimenting with face huggers, and they had them sealed up in a cryo chamber. It was very cold, but not too cold because the kids got in there, and I believe they were looking for what exactly were they looking for? I know they got in there. Were they looking for like
So
power cells, right?
yeah, they
Yeah,
had the cryo chambers that they all needed for interstellar space travel, but one of them, it almost like it had too little of the CO2. They were like CO2 canisters that were used to kind of, freeze over the subjects, and so they were looking for additional, I think, CO2 canisters to replenish the chambers that were depleted.
and of course there's like a foot deep of water in that cryo chamber, which makes sense because the cold mist it turns to water eventually. And Fede Alvarez commented on that. And he said, "I was amazed how 1 foot of water in that scene made all the difference because once the face huggers melted out of their little like ziplocked like ceram rant containment units, fell out, started swimming like fish, and knocked over one of the guys. And of course, the huge horror element came into play. Very, very dark. This movie was a very dark film. So hopefully, if you haven't seen it yet, go to the theater that has the brightest projection. But yeah, in that whole like build up, they used Rain's adoptive brother, who's a synthetic, to get access because he's a Weyland-Yutani synthetic, to get access on the ship, and they figured he'd have access everywhere. He didn't have access to exit the cryo chamber because it was the science officer that needed access, and of course, the science officer from the previous film was played by none other than the late great Ian Holm, and they saw a synthetic laying on the ground who was all jacked up, and I instantly knew from the back of his head, I was like, I hope they turn that thing around and see Ian Holm. And they did it. He turned around. Even in the shadow, you could tell that was Ian Holm's profile. They put him up on the desk. They turned the light on, and it was Ian Holm. I was like, oh my gosh. I wasn't spoiled. It was a total shock to me. There was uncanny valley there. It didn't look like it was an actual human. Of course, it wasn't because Ian Holmes passed away. It was
Right.
film was shot almost 50 years ago. So yeah, you have that kind of Grand Moff Tarkin, Rogue One, uncanny valley where you can tell. I mean, but see, it's getting to the point where it's interesting because all this uncanny valleyness for these people that they generate as a character that have either passed away or whatever the case may be, it's starting to grow on me a lot, like how these practical effects from like the 80s and 90s when I was growing up, I was like, get rid of all that, CGI it. And now it's like I kind of want to see that, to know that it's not actually him, and it's kind of something that I kind of want to see now. It's a weird thing. Technology is of course going to improve, and of course with AI everything's going to get better, but Fede Alvarez actually said in an interview that his family, his estate, totally approved, and they said that Ian Holm, late in his life, he thought that Hollywood kind of turned his back on him a little bit and wasn't getting called as much as he thought he would. But of course, I mean, he was Bilbo Baggins and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and he also reprised them in The Hobbit. So I mean, he was still getting work. He was in The Day After Tomorrow, one of my favorite films. Um, so he Ian Holmes' estate said he would be happy to be in this film. He wanted to still participate in Hollywood and be an actor. So I feel good about that, but I was wondering that during the movie. It's like, oh man, people are gonna write articles and throw a stink out there. Some people, but I liked it, man. It was a nice callback, and of course, it wasn't Ash from Alien. It was Rook, so it was just another model of that same
Right.
type of synthetic and science officer, still just as evil and corporatized as Ash was, with the directive of um, everything is expendable except for um, the alien that they were trying to gather and take back.
Yeah.
And
Still had the
synthesize.
same ambitious directives
Right,
as
right,
the original Ash did.
right. And they pulled out the chip and put it in Andy's neck. Andy became corporatized automatically. Got very, very cold, very mechanical. Lost his essentially lost his soul that Kaylee Spaney's character grew up with, and she treated him like a blood brother, like a real person, like someone she cared deeply about. And to see David Johnson flip that switch and get cold and very steely and just unforgiving and willing to sacrifice for, I guess, lack of a better term, the greater good, and the uh, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few type situation, um, was interesting. And when he reboot, that was awesome. His eyes rolled back. He saw the Weyland-Yutani. He like froze like this, and then when he came back, he caught a face hugger by the tail right above, I believe it was Spike, and he he was just like, "We need to get out of here," and he just flung it in. Yeah, the face hugger stuff was impressive. I think it was kind of like what Jurassic Park did with like the Velociraptors. One was actual practical, and the other one was CGI. And they're like, guess which one was which? And like everyone's like, I couldn't tell. I totally couldn't tell at some parts what face hugger was practical and which was CGI. Of course, the ones that are like running and jumping, CGI, of course. But when they were all kind of running, it's like, I mean, I can't really tell. All that stuff was great. The alien stuff was great. They made an actual practical alien that you
Yep.
can watch behind the scenes stuff on like a rig that they could push up to show them jumping and put in front of the actors with the second mouth there, like trying to bite and stuff. But
Yeah, I heard a story from Kaylee. I think she once got too close to the practical alien, and I think it either like scratched her by accident, like it got too in her face and scratched her, or something like that happened. She had like a minor injury because they just it is a massive animatronic xenomorph, and got a little too close for comfort during one filming one scene, and actually she had a little bit of an accident with it. So yeah, I heard
first
that behind the
Alien
scenes.
film too, where they refer to the actual alien as a xenomorph, and that was Ian
Yes,
Holmes' character Rook, where he said it, and it was like, wow, that's a first for the series.
you
And
pulled
his whole
Leonardo DiCaprio,
explanation,
and you're like,
yeah, his whole explanation of he explained it to the cast what was going on, that how he took um, material from the alien and tried to synthesize it and upgrade humanity, and it was essentially tying back to Prometheus and Covenant with the black goo, and that's what was like morphing stuff on the planet that ended up in Prometheus. And Rook mentioned Prometheus got fire from the gods, and then they played the theme from Prometheus in the background. Um, I love that callback as well. But the aesthetic was like Alien, going from Alien to Aliens. All the sound effects were cool. All the boot ups of all the screens, all the CRT screens, that looked really cool, and it worked totally. Um, Jumping from there, I mean, those kids did a really good job of not getting face hugged. And the one scene where the face hugger was like trying to impregnate the one guy, Fede Alvarez said he actually had the remote and he was working the the part of the alien that goes down the throat, and he was saying he was trying to get it in the actor's mouth, and of course the aim was like, and it was going inside of his mouth and coming out, and unfortunately one of the actresses got face hugged, and we saw the classic tail around the throat, and if you tried to mess with it, the tail got stronger and tighter. And Kaylee Spaney was like, no, no, no. If you touch it, it looks like it's getting tighter.
which is all
And then,
canon, by the way. It's always
right, right.
been sort of how they reacted.
And then, of course, Andy, the synthetic, was like, it appears that it's keeping her alive. If you look at the rhythmic movements of the airbags, and then the stomach, I mean, and the chest, it looked like it's. He kind of explained everything to them, which was a very convenient like device for uh, the movie there. So they knew what was going on. But then I think that was the first time, or maybe one of the second or third times, where they came up with a, and it was Kaylee Spaney usually that was coming up, Rain Carradine, who was coming up with all these solutions. What if we get the cryo gun and shoot the tail? Maybe we can like cause it to open up and then we can take it off. They did that. They showed it, take it off, took off the face hugger. It's way too late though. It impregnated the girl, and beforehand there was the device where it was like an X-ray viewing device, and of course she put it behind her back, and you saw something moving in her chest, and it's in the marketing. Isabella Merced, her character, gets her, grabs her, and then it explodes, and you hear her scream. And she wasn't in space, so we could hear her scream. So yeah, that was the first introduction uh, to one of the chest bursters.
I wonder because from watching all these films,
Mhm.
it always made it seem like some time would have to pass for the chest burster to come out, because the original Alien film, you would figure hours, if not like close
Right,
to
there would have
a
to be some type of like
day.
incubation period.
Yeah,
Um,
and
I
yet
mean,
still he was able to function somewhat normally after the facehugger had had deceased and had let go. So I was curious on like why this one maybe took such short amount of time. Perhaps it has something to do with the f- the fact that were they growing face huggers? I kind of felt like they were growing face huggers, or were these all captured from the planet they knew there were eggs on? That was curious to
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
We don't
yeah.
have
That
an answer, right, to that?
Yeah, we don't really have an answer to that. I mean, I like your second thought there that they picked them up and was able maybe to capture the eggs and kind of contain them and plant them. Or I mean, they could have been grown because we kind of saw a scene like that at the end of Covenant where David was growing in the trays, the face huggers. But yeah, we got the chest burster scene, um, and the iconic scene, and I love the fact where she was like, "Don't let me die," and then she jerked around, and then her foot hit the joystick, the handle of the ship, and it just automatically went to the side. And we got to see that at Comic Con, and with that base inside of Hall H, it was awesome to see those explosions, to see it ricochet and pinball inside that loading dock, very fortuitously, but yeah, it was awesome. But to go back to your wondering about the incubation period of the chest burster, if you think back to the Alien film, Kane, played by John Hurt, who had the original chest burster come out, he was very calm about everything because they didn't know what was going to happen. They weren't all freaked out. The face hugger just kind of like fell off. So he was eating. Maybe like stress levels had something to do with the acceleration of the bursting and of the growth, possibly.
Could be.
Maybe that's a thing, possibly. So yeah, we got to see that the collision. It was two stations together, and of course, you think Romulus if you know your history, the tale of Romulus and Remus, the Roman myth, and they show a little bit of the painting that's in there of the twins, and they show like the wolf with Romulus and Remus being like the cubs, um, and that's kind of what I thought of um, after I thought of Star Trek because Romulus is a planet in Star Trek. But yeah, that's an old thing taught to us in history class and in elementary school. But yeah, that whole sequence was fantastic. It seemed like it was all practical. Got the traditional alien, um, got to move away, and of course, the growth was just super accelerated there. And it ended up in that cocoon, and they had like cattle prods, and they shoved a cattle prod up in there, and unknowingly, knowing we know that it bled acid, started to bleed on the deck of the ship, and right before it bled on the guy, he got stabbed, I believe, with the tail, went down and started getting the acid poured on him, and that's like a
Which was
nightmare.
surprising because you and I were in Hall H when they showed us that scene, but they don't show the acid falling on his face. So that was actually a new element or a new component to
Ugh.
that scene. We thought he gets hit. I thought he gets like impaled in his head, like the bottom of his
Yeah.
head, like his chin, and that was that. But no, it was even worse than that. He survived, and then he gets eaten alive by the blood of a xenomorph.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
the cocoon is also a new feature, right? Because I watched the first two, none of that happened. We knew that the chest bursters would eventually molt their original
right.
skin, but
Yeah, like a snake.
we've never seen, I believe, um, kind of a cocoon occur afterwards and a xenomorph, come out from it, unless that's in one of the AVP films or Alien Resurrection. I don't believe we've seen that before, so that was, I thought, kind of new and really interesting.
Yeah, and Fede Alvarez talked about the fact that if you go back to the original Alien film, you don't see the alien actually like eating or doing anything to the actor that it killed. It's kind of like the Jaws effect, kind of happens off screen. But we saw a little bit more of what happened to the actors, and just seeing the guy's fingers like just melt off, and then eventually die from the acid to the chest and leak through that deck as well. It's horrifying, man. That's a nightmare. And of course, we have something similar like that on Earth. I think it's nucleic acid, I believe. It basically does that. It'll eat away. Is it nucleic? I'm not quite sure.
I'll go with that. Sounds right.
So yeah, we get that whole sequence, and we got actually character development for that guy. His girlfriend or his friend was saying that his family or his mom was left behind by a synthetic in a mine that collapsed, and that's why he had the whole issue with Andy there, and how he treated him. He was a big jerk to him, and they gave the reasoning why. Um, Moving on from that, what was the next thing that actually transpired after that? That was worth talking about.
Well, the one guy dies, and then the chest burster. Well, the chest burster already comes out. Crashed the ship. Kay, who's played by Isabella Merced, who's pregnant, by the way.
Yeah,
She,
that was a little reveal there that nobody knew except for Kaylee Spaney's character. And she
yeah,
was, I believe, was she the sister? Or
Kaylee.
think maybe the Isabella Merced's character.
She's the
She was with
sister
the one guy,
to
right? Or she was the
Tyler.
sister. Okay. Okay. And he was like shocked once he found that information, because she made it away from that alien, but the alien grew into full xenomorph form and was kind of stalking her. It was almost like they were trying to explain to the audience that it was waiting for her to open up a door to get to everyone else,
Oh wow.
to take them all and put them in like the cocoons and have face huggers and impregnate them. Um, and then Andy made the decision that he wasn't going to open that door. And what a horrible thing.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah,
I mean,
very
just
heartbreaking.
I mean it because by this point in time, as the audience already found out about she's with child, so you're not just letting this poor girl die, but you're letting this impregnated poor girl die, and it just it sort of raised the stakes. Like it increased her
Almost a
value to the
sadness
story.
quotient.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, we'd seen the first girl, the pilot, forget her name, Navarro. We saw Navarro when she passed, and we did feel something. But when you hear Kay's character is with child, and she gets taken, and she's in front of her brother who can't help her, and he's not able to do anything at all, and just watch her go. You actually really feel that she kind of dies in that moment, because you see the tail, there's like a spray of blood. So I assume maybe he got her in like the clavicle or something, the xenomorph, somewhere
I don't
where it
know.
wouldn't be as
Picked her up
fatal.
like she was nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere where it wouldn't be as fatal. But yeah, no, that was really like a heartbreaking moment to see that
Yeah.
happen. And I actually heard this that in that scene, director Fede Alvarez actually used a cold bucket of water and kind of splashed Isabella with it, kind of get a bigger reaction out of her. And I don't know if this is where he got it, but that is exactly what my favorite director of all time did, Alfred Hitchcock, during the big murder scene in Psycho. He actually had the shower go from warm to ice cold, so that there would be a kind of a bigger reaction from his actress during that scene. So wild. If I ever talk to Fede, I'm like, did you get that from Hitchcock? He might say, yeah, I did.
Yeah, I could totally see that, man. But yeah, she gets taken away. It's just Andy, um, Rain, and you said Tyler, right?
Tyler,
Or is
yeah.
that the other guy? Okay. Um, so yeah, they venture to another part of the ship. Andy reveals that he has access, that he knows about guns, and that was a cool part. They opened up like a gun cabinet, and Tyler has knowledge of how to use these guns, he says, from video games and magazines. And he says this is exactly what the Colonial Marines use. And of course, that's a callback to Aliens. And he shows Rain how to use it and shows the auto locking feature, which is super cool, which helps out. I mean, that whole trope of like, how do people shoot in movies and always hit the head, all of our heroes? And it kind of took care of that trope. And it was fantastic. You knew that we were going to get something cool with that. And of course, Andy says you can't fire a single round because we're on the lower deck of the ship. If you hit an alien, the acid blood will go right through, decompress. Everyone gets sucked out, of course. So he was like, we just have them just to intimidate and scare them off a little bit until it wears off. And it's like, oh man, it's like, are they actually going to get to fire these things?
Which is also another callback to Aliens, the
Yeah.
sequel, because the commandos, they were also Marines, right? They just called Marines. Did I
Yeah.
imagine that?
Colonial Marines, I believe.
Colonial Marines. They also could not fire in a certain spot of the ship they were on because they were surrounded by canisters that would explode if they were
Yeah, a
punctured.
nuclear explosion would occur until Vasquez said, "Let's rock."
So yeah. So I'm like, as soon as he said we can't use them, I'm like, oh my god, aliens. And I'm just like, what are the odds?
Yeah,
All
what
these
are the
weapons
odds
you can
indeed?
never
Yeah.
use.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Super cool
hilarious.
looking guns, like matte white finish, dirty. I mean, very very much like video game esque. I mean, with the like the shoulder like support and it locked in, and it looked like it had like a grenade launcher on it. Super cool. I want one of those. I want to hang one of those on my wall eventually. Um, So yeah, we got the explanation of that, and the thing that we didn't talk about was the gravitational purge that was going on in the station,
Great,
and of
great,
course,
great way of setting that up
right,
and recalling it.
fantastic device to use in a movie like this because of course, whenever you're introduced to certain things, just like this movie, it's going to come into play later on. A lot of foreshadowing there, and of course, me in the theater sitting there, it's like, how are they going to get out of this situation? So the purge, I mean, they figure, I mean, if the aliens are have no way to walk to you, I mean, they're going to be suspended in air, floating to you, but it enables you to shoot the alien and not have the acid blood drop to the lower deck and decompress. And there's a sequence where it was Rain and Andy thinking that they were both goners, and she was like, "Tell me a joke," and it was jokes that were programmed by her dad, who had passed away in the mines, programmed into Andy to tell dad jokes, and he mentions gravity in one of the jokes, and it clicks that let's purge the gravity and have these aliens just float. I can shoot. The acid blood will just float. We can kind of like swim around it. She used the auto locking mechanism on the Colonial Marine gun and headshotting everything in sight. Headshotting, I guess the face taggers are primarily head, but shooting them in the head, acid blood floating around everywhere. And some people have kind of complained that this is kind of video gamey, but it made sense in reality to me. So she floated around the blood, went up and down. Of course, at the very end, she had to fire the gun up to force her way down to avoid a huge blob of blood acid. And she
I
got
was, I
through it.
was, I had the Dance of the Swans from Swan Lake playing in my head as she was floating around the acid blood.
Or Super Mario Brothers. I mean,
Did it, did it, did it. Or what was the song played during the Ninja Turtles Nintendo game where you're swimming underwater trying to avoid
well, when
the.
Super Mario jumps in water in that one level, that music is very kind of like melodic.
Oh yeah. There you
Yeah.
go.
So yeah, great solution to a problem where they thought they were goners. Head to an elevator shaft where, of course, you figure there was going to be an elevator sequence. There was. There was one really smart alien. I think maybe it was the alien that was birthed there. He kind of hangs back and is like, "There's no gravity. I'm not going out there." So once the gravity hits back, of course, the acid blood drops, decompresses, the elevator that's pulled down and kind of seals for them, so you didn't have them get sucked down. But of course, that one alien is still there and grabs onto Rain's leg and keeps her from catching up with Andy. And Andy, of course, he's a synthetic. He holds the elevator with his strength for kind of a while. And then, as the other aliens that have already infected the station run up, he releases it, takes them out. But there's one alien left, and we kind of go back to throw back to the original film where there's one alien they got to contend with.
Okay,
Until.
so at this moment, before you give it away, I was thinking, okay, this is his sacrifice moment. He's just gonna fall. He's gonna kind of grab the xenomorph, pull him. They're both gonna fall to their deaths, and it'll be a heroic sacrifice. But no, he's more badass than that. He falls. He grabs the gun in one fell swoop, and shoots the creature dead, which was just incredible to see that
Yeah.
happen.
And delivers the iconic line, "Get away from her, you bitch." And he kind of says it with like a little stutter too. And I think some
It,
people
wa-
in the
it was the
crowd,
delay. We
yeah.
didn't think it was gonna happen. He was like, "Get away from her, you bitch."
And some people actually are taking a issue with that because I mean, like, why would he say that, you know? But I've heard the reasoning because he heard one of the other guys say "bitch" in some piece of dialogue off to the side, so that's where he kind of got that from. But yeah, it was a nice callback to the infamous, famous line from
100%.
Ripley. So yeah, we get all that, and of course, Isabella Merced's character. We all know she's pregnant. She's given an injectable that Rook describes as being the only thing that can save her. She, of course, is in tremendous pain. She's instructed to go to a cryo tube. She can't take the pain. She's like, "Screw it, I'm gonna inject myself." And of course, I think everyone safely assumes that that baby's gonna be jacked up. So of course, the baby pops out, and she has a delivery
Not
in
the
the cryo
baby.
tube.
An egg pops out,
Okay, yeah,
and
yeah,
Isabella in an interview said there was one scene, she didn't give it away, where the entire crew sort of could not watch as it was happening just because it sort of was so either grotesque or just too graphic. So a lot of the cast and a lot of the crew like would not watch one scene being filmed, and I'm pretty sure this was the one. So yeah, the going into labor scene with the not a xenomorph egg, alien egg, if you will, um
right. A xenomorph engineer
hybrid,
hybrid type
human
creature.
hybrid,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, that thing pops out in like an egg, and of course it acid bloods towards the bottom deck, right? And there's like sand, so maybe that's the explanation of why the acid didn't go through because I think that's the lower deck of the ship.
Like a cargo hold, yeah.
Right. Um, and then the baby comes out of the egg, leaves the egg behind it with like a pool of acid in it. Um, Rain goes down to try and search for it. You see the imprints of the feet in the sand, and Andy's up top with Isabella Merced. She crawls out of the
Okay.
cryotube, and so I didn't put all this together in my head when she reached in her shirt and pulled out the goo, but apparently she was lactating that.
Yes.
And I was like, "Oh my god," because I heard it in a review, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's so true." And then you finally see her baby, which is like a 9 foot tall or 7 foot tall, almost 8 foot tall, um, humanoid alien xenomorph hybrid creature, and it's just like staring, and it wants the mother's milk, apparently, and approaches her and I think knocks Andy out and cuts him again on the throat. He's bleeding the milky substance that all the synthetics bleed, and makes his way to Isabella Merced. Um, it's interesting in that when I saw the creature, I was like, it kind of looks like that one basketball player that we've seen a lot of videos of. He's like a teenager. He's like 7'9". Um, he had the same build. Apparently, they're reporting that he is the actor in that suit.
Oh wow.
So they got like maybe like a 19, 20-year-old guy who's 7'9" to be in the suit, and he was a practical effect. And when he's standing there, I think maybe the only thing that CGI is the tail, because you see the tail kind of move, unless they did that too and got rid of the wires or whatever. But that's the report. I haven't gotten like full confirmation on that yet, but um, yeah, it was wild. And I thought watching it, I was like, this is probably the part of the film where people are going to take issue with, because we've seen something similar to this, and a lot of people have had issues with these different designs of like the humanoid style aliens, that they don't look as good, and it's kind of a trope as well, like the movie monster type thing. Um,
It was better than the thing that they tried to do in Resurrection, that sort of blobbish looking hybrid.
Yeah, it had like the actual like elongated head with the skull in the front, and had
Yeah,
like a
that
really
was.
high stomach, and yeah,
I'll tell you what I thought. I thought this was sort of a version of the original Alien, not the xenomorph, but the one piloting the original ship that we later see in
right,
the
like one of the
premiere.
engineers. Yeah,
One
people,
of the
yeah,
engineers.
people were putting that together as well. Yeah,
Yeah, this
the
definitely
space
kind of
jockey.
had a more similar look to the engineers. Probably not one for one, clearly, because DNA, doesn't make sense or match up. But mixed with human DNA, this is what you get. But definitely, sort of the biology of it, half engineer like, or whatever race they are.
We get the climactic battle between Rain and this hybrid creature, and the egg is fortunately left over at the bottom with the blood acid. And she ingeniously kicks it to the ground and makes sure she's connected to the ship while decompression happens, sucks out everything, and we get the classic jump scare movie moment with the hybrid flying right into frame and screaming. Um, Wonder what that would look like in 3D. But we get that whole sequence, and she's trying to release the cargo hold, and fortunately, the rope connecting her to the ship slams the one of the levers, one of the last levers to release the cargo hold. She is
Well,
outside in space.
I think it
Yeah.
was hooked around it. So
Okay.
she had tension on it. So I don't think it did it.
So
I
she
think she
pre-planned that.
I don't think she pre-planned it, but she noticed like not I'm stuck, but the rope
The
can give me the
suction.
leverage,
Right.
and so she yanks it in a direction to help pull the final lever, because she had four and she was down to one, and luckily the rope, like I said, got tied up, tangled around it. So yeah,
And I really love the fact that they use the rings of that planet, the dust and the ice and the
it was a
debris that made up the rings
it was a
to,
great visual.
yeah, great visuals. And they pulled the camera around so you could watch as soon as the space station, there was a countdown for it to hit the rings. And once you saw it, it looked terrific. Um, just fantastic CGI, editing, explosions, and just perfection there. Um, and then you get to see the cargo hold drop with the hybrid inside of it and wreck through all the dust and debris in the rings. Um, and then that was she pulls herself back up into the ship. Um, gets I believe she gets Isabella Merced back in the cryo chamber. Andy is still there, not totally destroyed, not disemboweled like Ash was. Puts him in a cryo chamber as well. Um, which, I mean, wouldn't you just like flip the switch and turn them on? I don't know. Or is that not emotionally and sensitive enough on my part? But I don't know. They had a lot of tubes, cryo tubes, so they stuck them in there. Um, and that was essentially, I think, the end of the film, right? She does um like a verbal log, like Ripley, did at the very end, and she kind of expressed her ideas and thoughts for hope. For she didn't know what the future was going to bring. Um, we know the horrible end to Ripley going into Aliens 3 and finding out that all of her companions perished from Aliens to Alien 3. But will we get a sequel to with these characters? I don't know. Um, 50-50 chance right now. But
So I think the only difference is she doesn't put K into the cryo. That was before the birth. When I was doing my non-spoiler review, that was what I was saying. Like, oh, we had a good movie. This is the end. They're gonna get into the cryo chambers, but that's when Kay goes into labor, and that's when Andy comes out of his uh, sleep function, because Kay's cryo chamber fills with blood, and she goes into labor right there. So Kay doesn't survive at the end of this. I believe the only survivor is our
Andy and
main
Rain.
character. Yeah,
Yeah.
is only Rain.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to that portion. I mean, it feels like she did survive though. I thought she got back into a cryo tube. I thought they show her already in like it was a view through the window and she was in there like real quick because I mean, she gave birth, I mean, she was still okay and the hybrid did nothing to her.
The
Maybe
hybrid got a hold of her
right.
and it latched onto her, but it was a weird. You only saw the back. You kind of just see her head dangling. It almost looked like it attached itself to her neck,
It was
and it was.
suckling
I thought it looked like it was
like a
attached to her
vampire.
neck and draining her like of blood or sustenance, whatever you want to call it. Um, and so that's why I think Kay actually
Mother's
doesn't
milk.
survive by the end of this.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe you got to watch it a third time. But anyways, yeah, the movie ends right there. No after credits scene or anything. Um, if you did make it to the theater before the show, both showings that I had a little commercial for Alien Earth, which is going to be a TV show of Alien on Hulu, um, by super acclaimed, just like Fede Alvarez, Noah Hawley, who did Fargo, I believe. So that should be really good on Hulu. They're going to invest in it, and it's going to have a nice shot of adrenaline there from Alien Romulus' success at the box office and more fan interest in the franchise. So yeah, overall is a really good film. I'm happy for Fetty. Um, he said publicly that he would love to do an Alien Predator film with his buddy Dan Trachtenberg. Fetty said he could direct the Alien part of it, and Dan could direct the Predator part of it. I don't know how that would work. If you're gonna bifurcate the movie in half or something, I don't know what they're gonna do. But if it even happens, but Dan Trachtenberg actually was on set, and he said he couldn't tell us where he was and for what project he was doing. So hopefully, it's like another Predator film set in another century. Maybe, I mean, be cool if they did like World War I or like samurai times, ancient samurai. That would be really cool. Um, or maybe he's doing another Cloverfield movie. Who knows? So
I'm leaning towards Cloverfield just because I've waited longer for a Cloverfield
yeah,
sequel since I believe the first one came out in '08, if I'm not mistaken. It's either '07 or '08. So I've been waiting for a true Cloverfield sequel since that time. For those of you saying like we've had multiple no, 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 no. We've had multiple spin-offs, and we had one film that was shoehorned into the Cloverfield universe, but we've never had a true Cloverfield sequel. This franchise, this is the most convoluted franchise in the history of entertainment, and maybe besides Twin Peaks, which is also very convoluted, but that's convoluted on purpose. This one's a whole mess of itself just by accident or sheer incompetence. I have no idea. But we've not had a true Cloverfield sequel. So if Dan Trachtenberg is working on something, I really want it to be that Cloverfield sequel, which has really gone silent for the last 2 years since we got the announcement, maybe a year ago. But I do like Fede kind of saying, I would like to do an AVP film because I feel like those would be way more entertaining than the prior two AVP films that we got. In Fede, I trust anything he kind of does. And for those who have not seen the movie yet, I don't know why you're still watching the spoiler portion of our review. But Fede did say in an interview that I shared with David, the superfan, earlier, that there was no direct cameo of Ripley that we spotted. Fede says if you pay attention closely, there is something that calls out either about Ripley or I would even venture to say Ripley herself in this film. But it is so small and probably so quick. You really have to focus and pay attention to catch it. So somewhere in this movie is a major Ripley Easter egg. And we know because it's 20 years after the last movie that at this point in time, she's basically floating around in space waiting to be found. Um, that is what we expect. So or we anticipate. There should not have been any sort of not communication. There should not have been any sort of what was the word I'm looking for? Encounter with Ripley during that time. But Fede has also been very cavalier about this answer, and he says we don't know what happened in those 50 some odd years. I think it was 57 in the 57 years that she was gone. He said anything could have happened. So, if there's ever a sequel, perhaps we're going to find out what else happened to Ripley that she's not aware of in those 57 years. Dun dun dun. Do you have the answer to the Ripley Easter egg?
No, I don't. I don't. I think that's like a cool Easter egg. I'm a big fan of Easter eggs. I love it when directors do this. I mean, that really just shows that he really cares about the franchise and cares about movie making and fandom, and that's super cool, man. If I was directing stuff like this, I would totally do Easter eggs like that, and even have like backstory and like story that, I mean, you kind of have like your own like director's head canon for what happened, and it ties into other things, and it's not officially canon, but you can have stuff in the background that potentially can become something. And I think that might be some of the stuff he's referring to. But yeah, it can go years and years for big time films to not have Easter eggs discovered. I know, like James Gunn said, there's one last Easter egg for Guardians that hasn't been discovered yet.
I've been trying to figure that out since it came out. So yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Two kind of last points about this movie that I want to talk about. The reason why I also felt that this movie was tied to the colony, which was on the original planet that Ripley's team had found the first crashed ship with all of the facehugger eggs. The reason why I really thought that was because in the sequel of Aliens, they find one survivor. Ripley and the Marine commandos, they find one survivor.
Newt.
Unfortunately, she's already infected with huh?
Is it Newt in Aliens?
Not Newt. No. Oh,
Okay.
sorry. Well, they find a survivor before Newt, who's already been implanted with a chest burster,
Mhm.
and that person looks strikingly like Kaylee does, our main character Rain. And so I was like, oh, okay, so this is going to be that person, which is going to have a tragic ending for this movie. But I thought Rain was actually going to be the person that they find first on this abandoned, not abandoned, this colony that was already like overrun, and she was going to be the final person to kind of perish. And then they find Newt afterwards, and she's been surviving that entire time. The second thing is you brought up Alien Earth, which is going to be a series on Hulu coming out soon. That's been placed in the Alien timeline as the very first project. That predates Alien, the original film, which came out in the time period of 2122, and it even predates Prometheus, which came out in the Alien timeline as 2093. Alien Earth takes place in 2092. So they can do anything,
in our
basically.
century.
They can do absolutely anything. There are no rules to what they can go and do or go out there and achieve. Why they made it so early is beyond me. But this predates Ripley coming into contact with that first alien by 30 years. Is that right? 30 years. 30 years prior to the events of Alien. Remarkable. There's got to be a very good reason for doing that, because you could have done anything afterwards, anything at all. The movie span hundreds of years after that first encounter. But to go before it all, you had to have a good reason to do that.
See, I always thought that David was the one that kind of created the xenomorphs, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the story's going to be like. So, if it predates Prometheus, man, it's going to have to be kind of like one of those, like from Star Wars, the Acolyte. The Sith was there, but you see in the prequels that the Sith have been extinct for millennia. That type of situation. The aliens can't be like well known, you know, unless I mean my thinking is incorrect, but it feels like the aliens didn't really become prominent until the 1979 film in the timeline. But we'll see. I mean, they might do something really creative and inventive.
And the fact that it's called Alien Earth
Right.
leads you to believe that the humans have already encountered them, that they somehow, maybe this is the reason why we got off the damn planet in the first place. That could be a thing, um, for the reason for like all this interstellar travel was to get away from whatever happened.
Yeah. Interesting.
Wild.
And in the commercial, you do see the prototypical xenomorph in the marketing. So we're gonna have to see the xenomorph. And from what I've heard, the little of what I've heard, it's very the series is gonna be very heavy on dialogue. And the xenomorph is not gonna be as ever present as like a typical like I don't know action series. So it's gonna be used. Hopefully, it's going to be used smartly, and if it's used sparingly, like apparently the communication has been given.
All right, I think it's time for a giveaway. How about you?
Yeah, let's do this. You get
All
a
right.
face hugger and a official Wayland Utani patch right here.
I have all the names of all the folks. There's a few dozen names in here. All the folks that entered into our contest. This is for a San Diego Comic Con exclusive face hugger from Alien Romulus. And shout out to the folks over at Fantastic Fest. I'm using your tote in order to pull the winner out. So, the winner, the winner of the Alien Romulus face hugger and the badge slash sticker, right?
Patch,
This is a big prize.
a hybrid patch.
Thomas Rivera. Thomas Rivera, big time follower of ours. He's probably going to be really stoked that he won. So, congrats, Thomas.
Congrats,
You're the
Thomas.
winner of our Alien Face Hugger San Diego Comic Con exclusive, which was given to us by the kind folks over at 20th
20.
Century
Yeah,
Studios while we were in Hall H being attacked by facehuggers. Uh, that was a wild, wild moment. Never gonna forget that.
yeah. One of our core Hall H memories for sure.
And we should probably also do our Geekcast rating by now. We forgot to do that. So 1 to 5 scale, 1 being Alien versus Predator 2. Is that the worst
Requiem.
movie?
Yeah,
Requiem? Is that the worst? That's probably the worst one, right?
I think so. It's the rated as the worst.
And then 5 being I'm gonna surprise you here. I think Aliens 2 is the best movie out of this
Okay.
entire franchise. I don't know how you feel, but
Aliens. Yeah, it's considered one of the
Aliens.
greatest sequels of all time.
I
That
put
and The Empire Strikes Back. Yeah.
Yeah, I put Aliens above the original, and not for any sort of bad reasons, like not l pu bringing down Alien because it's such an iconic film, but just Aliens gave us kind of so much more and gave us, like, so many iconic characters. Um, yeah, just Vasquez alone, right, is just like
Let's rock.
I mean, it should not kind of go unnoticed that this was a Latina female being shown in this specific light.
Right. So the actress was white. She was Jewish, but they
That's
made
right.
her look Latina,
But what I
which
mean is the
it worked
character,
though. Yeah, yeah.
the character specifically is written
Right.
as a soldier, like Latin female,
Right.
and she's just like this ultimate badass, more than all these other commandos, more than
Yeah.
Ripley, and that's not putting Ripley down at all. But just to put someone like that, in that kind of light at that point in time, when you had guys like Stallone and Schwarzenegger out there doing things, like, to do that with a female was bold and it worked.
Yeah. Very forward
Worked
thinking.
100%. Okay, I'm gonna go first because I think I know where your head's at here. So I'm giving Alien Romulus a 4.5. I loved everything they did. Fede did an incredible job from the practical to the special effects to the horror elements to the death scenes to the score, which felt like it was pulled directly from the original film. There's nothing I would change. The only thing I would ask for is more. I would love to have seen more deaths. I would love to have the horror element of this movie kind of amped up even more. I loved what we got, but I felt like we could have even got kind of bigger scares, more intensity of some of the scenes. And also, I might be slightly not biased, but I think that you and I were already familiar with like 2 or 3 of these death scenes. So there's a lot of the shock and awe that might have been taken from us. And that's not a fault of the movie. So I'm still giving it a 4.5, which is a nearly perfect score. But kind of for folks to see this for the first time in its entirety, I would kind of love to hear their point of it because you and I did see a lot of these things really early on. So I wonder if that took us out a little bit because we knew how some of these things were going to turn out. But let's get your score, sir.
I'll go with a 4.5 as well. I think that's a high score for a film, and I think it's the third best Alien movie that we've gotten. Third or fourth. I mean, I have a real soft spot for Prometheus and Covenant, and Michael Fassbender is one of my favorite actors. But I think overall for the genre, we kind of got back to basics, um, and kind of piggybacked off of the original Alien, which started it off. So I could comfortably rank it as like the third best after Alien and Aliens. I know you said Aliens was the best, but I think it's kind of like the whole Star Wars Empire Strikes Back argument, and I go back and forth all the time on that. And I think it's the same way with this franchise, Alien and Aliens, and then Alien Romulus. I think we can put it in that that family right after the original two, which probably will never be topped. So high
Yeah,
praise.
no, I definitely not ever to be topped. And might I also add, like you, I went back to watch the originals. I even didn't want to stop. I went and watched 3 because it had been decades since I'd seen the third film. And man, it's such a kick in the gut that we spent the entire second movie trying to keep Newt alive, and then you kill her off screen in the
Yeah.
third film. I mean, dear God, I was just like, how jacked up is that?
But they had to
I
because it was years later, and they couldn't have that same kid running around, and it was
so you recast. You either recast or you have her survive, and this
David
is
Fincher
years.
did not want to work with children.
What I'm saying is, there's other ways of you
Right,
didn't
right.
have to crash the ship. Not to mention, I don't want to get into this right now, but there was a face hugger that did implant an egg into Ripley between 2 and 3, but then there was an additional face hugger that attached itself to a dog that was on the planet they crashed on. And that's not how face huggers work, right? It's like a one injection type creature, and yet they only showed us one egg. They showed us one egg, and yet there's two implants during this time period during Alien 3. So again, math ain't mathin'. All in all, I just wish they probably would never made Alien 3. And I'm not a person who says that a lot, who says, like, no, we should not have gotten that sequel. I usually like to see sequels, even when they're not good. But changing the entire landscape of a franchise is not okay, which has happened to a lot of franchises. So all in all, yeah, just 3 is a kick in the nuts.
Yeah, that beginning of the 20th Century Studios logo, it had that kind of same like orchestrative flourish that Alien 3 had. Um,
That
yeah,
tense sort of
it's like the
ringing.
strings kept on playing when
Yeah,
they should have stopped. Um, I watched Alien 3 this past week for the very first time from beginning to end. And surprisingly, I didn't have that big a problem with it like I
I had a
did
lot
when
of
I was a
problems with it.
kid.
We probably should talk about this another time.
I
there's
mean,
one there's one scene where they're walking. Ripley's walking with a guy, and she's like, "How can you see in these dark tunnels?" And I'm like, "It looks really well lit. I don't know what you're talking about, Ripley." Just not a whole lot worked well. The design of the creature and how it sort of would change from like a dog-like creature to like a full size Xeno was like also kind of jarring to me.
yeah.
It just
And,
wasn't very cohesive from
and the
start to
wild thing
finish.
was we had a young Charles Dance in it from Game of Thrones. I was pleasantly surprised to realize that, oh my God, it's him as a young man, and he was
Yeah,
the romantic lead.
who does not make it to the end.
Oh man, it's unfortunate and tragic end.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, that'll do it for us. For the Countdown City Geeks. My name is Ted, aka Steady. Be sure to let us know what you thought about the film. Give us your own rating. And congrats again to Thomas Rivetta, big fan of ours, big longtime follower. I'm sure he's gonna be so excited to get that face hugger and the rest of our Alien Romulus prizes. Joining me on this review, superfan David Fede Alvarez.
Yep, I Fetty did it again. Awesome addition to his filmography. Congratulations, Thomas, on that SDC 2024 Hall H exclusive face hugger. It's really cool. You can actually wear it for your Halloween costume if you want to. Maybe wear some coveralls and put the thing on your head. It's got eye holes. Super cool. Super articulate. It's on my Stormtrooper right now. That's my personal one. That's Ted's personal one, and we have yours off to the side here that we're gonna either hand it to you or ship it off to you with a Wayland Utani core patch. So congratulations, awesome stuff from Romulus, and can't wait for Alien Earth.
Have a good night, folks.
Impact event in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.